Welcome to our continuing series, Questions and Answers for a World in Crisis. Today, Receptivity and Openness, Part 2. Disciple. Mother, in my right leg, from the thigh right down to the heels, some nerves are not working properly. I have a feeling of numbness, and I limp while walking. And sometimes, if I'm not careful, it appears that I may lose control. Please see. It started when I was ill in January. I wonder why these things do not get cured unless I inform you physically. When it is for others, I inform you in silence, and it works. Can you tell me? Mother. It depends on the physical receptivity of each one. And that receptivity depends itself on the more or less dominating mind. 3 March 1963. Disciple again. Mother, will any doctor believe that yesterday, when I was writing my letter to you, the swelling of my groin was so big that I had difficulty in walking? This morning, when you received my letter, I began to feel that it was shrinking. By the time I got your reply, it was reduced to half. Now I can run. The swelling of the foot also goes down in the same way, but neither goes away completely. They reach a point where they are harmless, and then the progress stops. Mother's reply. This gives the exact measure of your body's receptivity. Concentrate the force on the diseased parts, and they will improve. About 1966. Disciple again. Mother, I can't say why I feel too dull to call you. That is for you to reply. Such dull periods come after the bright periods when everything seems to call you and be dedicated to you. In these dull periods, nothing but tamas seems to rule. Generally, they pass after a few days. Mother. This is a proof that your whole being is not unified around the central psychic presence. This is a personal task that each individual must do for himself. The help is always there, but the effectivity of its action is in measure of the receptivity and the conscious appeal. After all, it is a question of patience in the endeavor, with love and blessings. 3 December 1967. I don't see any contradiction. There are 4 ways of curing an illness spiritually. 1 consists in putting a force of consciousness and truth on the physical spot which is affected. In this case, the effect produced depends naturally on the receptivity of the person. Supposing the person is receptive, the force of consciousness is put upon the affected part, and its presence restores order. Many of you here can tell how Sri Aurobindo cured them. It was like a hand which came and took away the pain. It is as clear as that. In other cases, if the body lacks receptivity altogether, or if its receptivity is insufficient, one sees the inner correspondence with the psychological state which has brought about the illness and acts on that. But if the cause of the illness is refractory, not much can be done. Let us say the origin is vital. The vital absolutely refuses to change. It clings terrifically to the condition in which it is. Then that is hopeless. You put the force, and usually it provokes an increase in the illness, produced by the resistance of the vital, which did not want to accept anything. I speak of the vital, but it can be the mind or something else. But receptivity opens to other levels. Those who live in a world of desires and passions increase their vital receptivity so much at times that it reaches proportions very unpleasant to themselves and to their surroundings. And then there are those who live in the mental consciousness. Their mental receptivity grows very much. All who create mentally study and live in mental activity. If the mental activity is constant, can progress indefinitely. Mind in the human being does not stop functioning even when the physical instrument has deteriorated. It may no longer manifest its intelligence materially. If there is a lesion in the brain, for example, but nothing can prevent the mind itself, independently of the instrument, from progressing, from continuing to grow. It is a being that lasts infinitely longer than the physical. It is still young when physically one is already old. Only when you do not take enough care to keep your brain in a good state, only if accidents occur and there are lesions, then you can no longer express yourself. But the mind in itself continues to grow. And those who have a sufficient physical balance, for example, those who have not gone to excesses of any kind, who have never mistreated their body, who have never poisoned themselves like most people, who have never smoked, drunk alcohol, and so on, keep their brain in a relatively good condition, and they can progress, even in their expression, till the end of their life. It is only if in the last years of their life they make a kind of withdrawal within themselves that they lose their power of expression. But the mind goes on progressing. In flowers and their messages, and the spiritual significance of flowers, we find many flowers carrying the message of receptivity. The beautiful gladiolus is predominant among all, for its message is receptivity. Here are some of the messages. Intimacy with the divine, complete surrender to the divine, and total receptivity to his influence are the conditions for this intimacy. This is Mother's comment. The plant is Lagostremia indica, the crepe myrtle. We will have more in part 3. From Sri Aurobindo. It is a fact that by fasting, if the mind and the nerves are solid, or the will force dynamic, one can get for a time into a state of inner energy and receptivity, which is alluring to the mind, and the usual reactions of hunger, weakness, intestinal disturbance, etc., can be wholly avoided. But the body suffers by diminution, and there can easily develop in the vital a morbid, overstrained condition due to the inrush of more vital energy than the nervous system can assimilate or coordinate. Nervous people should avoid the temptation to fast. It is often accompanied or followed by delusions and a loss of balance. Especially if there is a motive of hunger strike, or that element comes in, fasting becomes perilous, for it is then an indulgence of a vital movement which may easily become a habit injurious and pernicious to the sadhana. Even if all these reactions are avoided, still there is no sufficient utility in fasting, since the higher energy and receptivity ought to come not by artificial or physical means, but by intensity of the consciousness and strong will for the sadhana. I am glad to know the disturbance was expelled last night. Now the receptivity of the body consciousness has to be kept so that it may not at all return, or if it tries, may immediately be expelled. You must always try to keep the quietude. Not allow depressing or disturbing thoughts or feelings to enter you or take hold of your mind or your speech. There is no true reason, after one has gained the inner quietness and wideness, why that should be allowed to lapse and these things enter. And if the mind keeps its quietude and receptivity to higher forces only, it can then easily pass on that quietude and receptivity to the body consciousness and even to the material cells of the body. It is not possible to accept the suggestion about joining with those who are in personal attendance upon me. They were not admitted as a help to their sadhana, but for practical reasons. In fact, here also there is some misconception. Continual personal contact does not necessarily bring out the action of the force. Hriday had that personal contact with Sri Ramakrishna and the opportunity of personal service to him. But he received nothing except on one occasion, and then he could not contain the force and the realization which the Master had put into him. The feeling of losing himself, which X had, was on the special occasions of the darshan and the pranam to the mother. That he had this response shows that he can answer to the force, that he has the receptivity, as we say, and that is a great thing, for all do not have it. And those who have it are not always conscious of its cause, but only of its result. And lastly, receptivity to force in curing illness. I mean a certain receptivity in the consciousness, mind, vital, physical, whichever is needed. The mother or myself send a force. If there is no openness, the force may be thrown back or return, unless we put a great force, which is not advisable to do, as from an obstruction or resistance. If there is some openness, the result may be partial or slow. If there is the full openness or receptivity, then the result may be immediate. Of course, there are things that cannot be removed all at once, being an old part of the nature. But with receptivity, these also can be more effectively and rapidly dealt with. Some people are so open that even by writing, they get free before the book or letter reaches us. 8/6/1933.